Hello and welcome to Vestlin Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Charlson, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how you can begin to channel more deeply. And this is all about some more advanced channeling techniques that I've been teaching to some new students that I wanted to share a bit more about to help you on your own channeling journey. So let's get into it. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different, and it's because it's all focused on the human side of channeling. So, Monty won't be joining us to share his spirit being perspective. And if you want to hear more about the spirit side of channeling, you can listen to one of the episodes that's linked in the show notes below. But in today's episode, it's going to be all about the human aspect of channeling, my personal experiences as a channeler, as well as my experiences as a channeling coach that I am in the process of teaching others to channel. And so I want to share some common things that I see. But before we get into that, I first need to explain a little bit about the type of channeling I'm going to be talking about. There are many different types of channeling. Some of them can range from what is termed more like psychic mediumship, where you are fully conscious and fully in your body, and you're taking in the signs, symbols, and signals that you're seeing or through psychic knowing, and that you're translating that to someone else or in messages that you're sharing. So most psychic mediumship is more of an external style channeling where the source of guidance stays outside of you. You're not allowing it to really take over your body or join in to your conscious form. The channeling that I'm going to be talking about today is what we call internal channeling or combined channeling or mixed channeling. Your consciousness is back behind a little bit to make way and to give them that ability to channel through you. And this can be in voice channeling, this can be in through expressive dance. There's lots of different ways that this channeling can happen in the forms that it takes, but it's all that mixed state where you are surrendering control of your body over to the source of guidance that you're channeling. So that's the type of channeling we're going to be talking about today. As a voice channeling teacher specifically, the process that I've seen a lot of students go through is really similar. No matter what their energetic background is or how far they've gone on their spiritual journey, it usually takes the same shape over and over. So I've talked about my own process of learning how to channel in a previous episode that I'll link in the show notes below. But as you know, I spontaneously channeled the first time. And a lot of that was because I did a ton of energy work in the years leading up to that moment. But what I haven't really talked about is my own process of how I learned how to channel. And it wasn't something that really happened very organically that I just surrendered to the experience. As someone that is a very driven individual, I sought out lots and lots of different texts on how to channel. And I probably have one of the most robust libraries in the United States on channeling of how to actually channel, not channel the material, but the process of channeling. And then I sought out teachers, and I've studied under two different individuals that are really experienced channels and learned a lot from them. And that was my process of learning how to channel, was in a formal setting. And a lot of students that come to me have not learned in a formal setting. And I'm not saying that that's better or worse one way or another. Everyone's journey is different. But regardless of how you got to channeling, it looks really similar if you're on the road towards voice channeling or allowing the entity that you're channeling to come into your body and going through that surrender process. So the first thing is many people do come to spontaneously channeling the first time, but not everybody does. Some people decide, hey, I saw this. I want to be able to do that. I think that's so cool. And it is not an obligation that you spontaneously channel the first time to be able to actually learn how to channel. It is a skill like everything else that you can develop and work on. And in fact, one of the things that I think is really difficult for people to understand is that, yes, there are people that channeling comes very naturally to, but it does require discipline. It's a very different type of discipline, which is something that Monty has reiterated to me many times. It's about showing up in a very different way. It's about having that accountability with yourself and saying, okay, I'm feeling these emotions right now. I'm going to set those to the side. My thinking mind is going crazy. I'm going to set that to the side. Okay, I feel like I can hold this space and now come into that channeling state. And working very diligently on improving your ability to be in that channeling state. So it's a very different type of discipline. It comes with a lot of self-awareness. It's learning those different key aspects of that kind of discipline of coming to your channeling practice. Learning how to ground properly is often the first step. I have found that my channeling improves the more grounded that I am. It is more easily interpreted and understood and received by others by allowing myself to be grounded, but also it allows me and my body to surrender even more deeply to that experience. It allows me to remove my conscious even more because when our bodies don't feel safe because they don't feel grounded, it can be very difficult for us to surrender fully and completely to that experience. There's always part of our energy that's saying, "Ooh, I don't feel really quite safe doing this," when we tend to be ungrounded. And when I say grounding properly, I don't mean that we send our energy down and we say we feel grounded. When we ground properly, you really feel that your entire body is extremely heavy. You could move it, but you don't want to. And it feels sometimes a bit uncomfortable if you're not used to it. So it's a practice of learning how to ground so you become comfortable with it, that your consciousness and your body likes being grounded, feels safe in being grounded, feels connected to being grounded. Because the act of channeling is really taking things from the spirit world, from the non physical, and bringing it into the physical. So we are quite literally grounding that energy. And the more grounded that we are, the easier that is for us and the more accurate our channeling is. Now, there are some other opinions about channeling out there, but this is what I found that works really well for me and for my students. Now, when you actually decide to begin allowing other beings to take control of your body, it's something that you should always do consciously and with a lot of discernment. It's not something that you want to say, okay, I'm going to wait for it to spontaneously happen all of the time, because there is an issue with channeling in terms of psychiatric issues. Now, channelers that do it very consciously, scientifically speaking, research shows that they are actually rated lower on most of the psychiatric scales that look for dissociative disorders. In fact, most of the time, they are much more in tune with their emotions and unreactive and in control than the average population. When it comes to you're ungrounded, you're spontaneously channeling all the time, you're not someone who's really in control of that. And that can lead to that you begin to tap into energies that aren't appropriate for you, that are too expanded for you to be able to handle, or that cause you to disassociate from grounded reality. So that is also another reason why it's important that we are doing it consciously as we're entering into a channeling practice. It's something that we should use our discernment with, because when we're releasing control to something else, it's a certain level of trust, mutual trust. So not only are we trusting the being that they have our highest intentions and highest good in mind, and that they're coming through for a particular purpose and not just for fun and to just be here in physical, but for a reason that we are creating this relationship. But we're also asking them to trust us. It is a two-way relationship, which I think is not highlighted enough in channeling development, is that a lot of times it's we have to always be the ones to surrender. We always have to be the ones that are allowing. They also have to have a certain amount of allowing. They are dealing with our humanness, which can be very uncomfortable for them. So they have to trust that we have prepared our vessels in a way that makes it easy for them, makes it appropriate, makes their energy in alignment with our energy in a way that it's compatible and harmonious. Because when it's not, it can be uncomfortable for both of us and have some really negative effects. But once we've gone through the process of really having keyed in discernment of external channeling, of we can tell what we're connecting to, we've started to develop trust externally with that source of guidance, and we get into the process where we're allowing them into our bodies and allowing them to assume a level of control, it looks a little weird when you first start doing it. And it's something, again, you should be entering in consciously. But once you've kind of done that and allowed that other consciousness to enter into your body, it can get a little weird from there and be kind of uncomfortable because your logic mind is like, whoa, what is going on? What this can look like is that many times your body starts to move around. Your head starts to wobble and bobble. And it's often very much your body first that is moving. rather than you're saying words or full sentences. Most of the time, it's just acclimating the energy into your body. So when you begin channeling consciously, a lot of the time you'll start to move around and it's in ways that don't feel quite natural to you. When I first started working with Monty in classes under supervision and was going through the process of allowing him into my body, my head would often bob like this in very rapid movements to the point that afterwards my neck would often be a little bit painful. And this is the process of them getting adjusted to your body, getting adjusted to being in a body because they're not used to it. But it's also allowing you to come to a certain amount of surrender. As you're allowing them into your body for the first time, they're having to adjust, but you're also having to learn how to surrender control. Because even if you've done a lot of work where you're astrally projecting or leaving your consciousness out of your body in some way, it's not the same as surrendering your body to another being. So it is that certain level of adjustment of allowing your consciousness to sit further and further and further back. Now, another thing that I'll say is that I focus on what we call semi-conscious trance. So we are still conscious, we're still there, but we're in a deeper meditative state. We're not quite in a full trance where we don't know what's going on and we still have control. And the consciousness, for me at least, sits kind of back behind my head. It's still within my energetic body, so that way I'm still in control and it's not completely left. So it is different than, say, astrally projecting where you're really out of your embodied energy. Now, after you've done that for some time, as you progress in your channeling where you are moving around and allowing it to move your body, from there, it may start to feel as though you want to make some noises, that you can feel some energy inside of your throat. And this is what happened for me the first time that I spontaneously channeled, is that I felt energy wanting to come out of my throat and allowed it to speak. I had been on the process of learning to surrender for quite a while. So that's why I think I channeled spontaneously for the first time and what Monty has confirmed for me as well. But when we decide that we're going to do it, it doesn't usually come out in full words and in full sentences. The very first time that I channeled Monty, I sounded like a whale, or I guess we sounded like a whale, because I was still consciously in my body. I was allowing him to take control, but I wasn't yet to the point where my consciousness was out of my body to the behind of me, kind of hanging out there. So my consciousness is inside of my body going, wow, you sound really dumb. This sounds really stupid. I can't believe you're letting this happen. Also, are you just making this up? And that's often what it feels like, both when your body is beginning to move on its own, being directed by the source of guidance that you're channeling, as well as when you begin to allow it to make noises. And it can sound like a lot of gibberish. Now, in some ways, there are some similarities to light language, but I do think that there is a key difference between light language and just the gibberish of learning how to voice channel. Light language has meaning behind it, but it may not be something that we can understand with our logical minds. Whereas the gibberish of learning how to voice channel, it's just experimental of I'm going to try making these different noises to test it out. It's kind of like a baby gurgling of just figuring out what kind of noises they can make rather than light language that has a specific conscious meaning to it and a specific kind of cadence and way of being. Versus when I was making whale noises, it was not really that sort of conscious coming through. It was more of Monty trying out and testing my vocal cords to see, okay, well, if I do this, how does it come out? Or if I do that, how does it come out? And eventually, after doing that for a few sessions of sounding like a complete idiot in my logical mind, we started to formulate words. And this is the process that I've seen most students go through, is that it goes through this experimental stage of testing out the body. Can I move it around? Okay, now that I've done that, can I test out the vocal cords? What do they sound like? How does that work? Can my human counterpart surrender enough that I can be in control? Can they allow their logic mind to take a back seat? That's what that process in the beginning kind of looks like to a certain extent. After you've kind of started making these weird noises, it's learning how to surrender even more is really the key. So we have to know how to ground really well, how to discern really well, and then how to surrender really well. And it usually comes in that process of we ground, we beef up our discernment, and then we work on surrender once we get to that point. But it's usually in that process. And as part of that, sometimes we learn, oh, I still wasn't grounded enough. I still don't feel safe enough. Or my logic mind is really getting involved here, or my emotions are getting really involved here. I need to set those to the side. So, one of the other things that I feel like is not talked about enough in channeling is that our emotions can absolutely affect our channeling. And I have had that happen before in a client session. I had a really terrible day, was going through some really difficult stuff with my life, and showed up to the channeling session just in a bad mood. I did not do a good job of setting aside my emotions. And thankfully, it was with a client that knows Monty really well. The guidance that came through was correct, but the tone was off. And that's what can happen with our emotions, even if we're conscious of them. I knew that I was having a bad day, but didn't set them to the side enough. And so they interfered in that way of they got involved. And if we allow them to get too involved, then that can also change the meaning of what we're channeling, of that our emotions can kind of co-opt that and take over. The same can be said with our logical mind. It can interfere. And that's also part of the process of learning how to set aside the emotions, to set aside the logical mind, and come into that full channeling state. And that comes with a lot of discipline. So as you get better at going through that surrender process of grounding, discerning, setting aside your emotions, your thinking mind, and then understanding that you don't know anything, that your source of guidance is the one that knows, you can begin to start to formulate words. And what I will say is that it doesn't come out very clear, even though you're making words and you know that they're words that are coming through. And it can sound a little bit like a broken record. When I first started to voice channel Monty, even when I was first doing sessions for other people, sometimes he would repeat words 3 or 4 times in a row. It would be as if he got kind of his energy got stuck, and it would repeat as if it were a broken record, just going back to the same point over and over until it'd finally get free and continue on with the sentence. And that would happen sometimes, as well as he would mispronounce words and it would come through kind of garbled, or he would say the wrong word entirely, that it was getting our frequencies to kind of match, as well as coming even more into that surrendered state. So it was allowing my energy to be as expanded as Monty needed it to be, and doing the prep work of really clearing my channel and expanding my channel out enough so that way he could come through much more clearly, and we didn't have those skips or mispronunciations, or sometimes there would be like whole sections of sentences that would get left off because it wasn't being transferred correctly. So it took more of a dedicated practice of allowing myself to channel without anyone watching. It was a lot of every morning I would do my normal energy practices, and then I would just create a voice note on my phone and go through the steps to channel, connect with Monty, and let him share whatever he needed to share. And some of those first messages, I went back and listened to them recently, are pretty bad. They're not really intelligible at the point where I was. I can understand them now of what Monty was trying to tell me because I've gotten to know him really well. But the other thing that I've noticed is that even though the energy is a little garbled as it's coming through, you can absolutely tell that it's him. He hasn't really changed over the course of how long I've channeled him, but his presence shows up more and more. Of you can tell it's more of his personality and more of his energy that's coming through, which is also a big part of channeling, is that we have to understand that the source of guidance is the thing that is responsible when we are channeling. Once we get into that surrendered state, we have to understand that we don't know what they're going to say. We don't know what's best to say. We don't know what they're going to talk about, and we don't know how they're going to talk about it. All of that is an act of surrender, of understanding that it's someone else that is saying this. They are the ones responsible for it. And so it feels a bit like we're abdicating responsibility, but that is what surrender truly is in this, is that you have to learn to say, okay, I am not responsible for this, which then gets into some interesting ethical questions when you begin to provide channeling for somebody else of, okay, they trustworthy enough, my source of guidance, to understand what's ethically appropriate for this individual or not? And not all sources of guidance do know that human line of what we would consider ethical. So it's building that trust over time with your source of guidance before you kind of take them public that is important, or allowing yourself to do it in a setting where everybody knows you're learning how to channel. Your source of guidance is also learning how to channel, and it gives feedback to you as the channel of how you can surrender more, but to the source of guidance of how that guidance hit, how it landed, and whether or not it was helpful. Because, and this is key in the teachings that I do and I have participated in, a lot of times we want to say to the channeler, that really hit for me, or it didn't really resonate. And the channeler's only job then is to say, okay, was I as fully surrendered as possible? Were my emotions and logical mind out of the way? If they weren't, I wasn't doing my job. If I was doing all of that, then it is the source of guidance that really is accountable here. And that's that balance of really knowing and understanding that your job as a channeler is to keep your vessel as clear as possible and to be in as a surrendered state as possible in trust with your source of guidance, rather than being the one that crafts the messages. And it is a very, very different perspective, especially if you've done teaching or coaching before. It can be very hard to say, okay, I'm not the one responsible for this. That's my source of guidance. But for me, it's actually been quite freeing of saying, okay, all I have to do is take care of my vessel. That's my job. Monty's job is making sure that the message is the right one at the right time for the right person. So I hope this has helped you think a little bit more deeply about your own goals for channeling, if it's something that you're interested in. And if you would like to learn more about channeling, I have 2 options for you. So if you want to channel, but you've never really been able to get in tune with your source of guidance at all, you need to begin with external channeling first, as we talked about in the beginning of this episode, that most people start with external channeling because it allows you to develop the skills of grounding and discernment and setting aside your logic mind and your emotions. That's the key that you have to start with as a foundation. If you'd like to learn how to do that, I have a self-guided course called Spirit Guidance for Beginners that goes through the process of learning external channeling. And once you've gotten to the point where you can reliably external channel and you want to go into more of that internal mixed state of channeling, then it's time to do it under guidance. And the reason why I say it's important to do this with someone instead of on your own is because when you're in that fully surrendered state and you're not as in control and you're still learning that discernment and still learning that process, I have found that having supervision is really important to getting the most out of your channeling practice. So it's a lot of practicing on your own, but then also working with someone to help guide you. And that I really firmly believe is the reason why I can channel as successfully as I do now, is because I had somebody else that could keep me accountable in that process, not of just showing up to practice all the time, but watching what was going on energetically and saying, okay, well, your emotions are too in the way. Even though that teacher didn't really know anything about me or what I was going through, that they were able to discern that and see that and be able to guide me that way. And to show me what it looked like when my emotions were in the way or my logic mind was in the way, because it's not something that maybe we have the awareness always for. So if you are ready to get into that part of your channeling journey, I do offer one-to-one coaching that you can find out more in the link below. I hope this episode has helped you understand more about channeling, especially the things in channeling that aren't as much talked about this process that can be really weird as we're getting into those more surrendered states of channeling and integrated with our guides. As always, if you have any questions, you can text me or Monty or us together at the texting line at the link in every show note. We hope that this episode has resonated with you, and we'll see you in the next one.